Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Today's video is going to be my February book reviews video where I just review every book that I read in February, and I read 14 things this month, so this is going to be a really long video. I'm just going to get straight into it. First up, I read this novella. This is by Melissa Bank and it's called The Worst Thing a Suburban Girl Could Imagine. It begins and our main character is a woman in her early 30s, and her dad has had cancer for a really long time but he hasn't told her. So she just finds out her dad's been really ill for a long time and she hasn't been told this, and his condition is getting worse. She has a career that she doesn't really like her career, but it's a really good job, and then an ex-boyfriend of hers comes back into her life. That's all I'm going to say about this because it's so short, I don't want to ruin it. It really deals with the subject of you can have a great career and be very successful, but if you don't feel appreciated in your job, you don't really enjoy your job, getting a simpler career that her friends would look down upon, would actually make her more happy within life. Really liked this book. I also thought it had kind of hints of domestic violence within it, the beginnings of domestic violence, someone putting you down continually, little subtle things that people do to chip away at your self-confidence. I really liked this and it's really short and I just adored it. I loved the way it was written. Really great novella. The next one I actually got for free from the publishers, and that is because Dane, he has a booktube channel here, I'll put his booktube channel down below. He got me in touch with the publisher of this book and they sent me this book for free because he said that he thought it was something I might like. This is non-fiction. It's called The Pull of the River by Matt Gore. The publishers are, should probably say the publishers, Elliot and Thompson. And this is non-fiction, and basically Matt and his friend built a canoe and then they decided to go through the rivers of England. So this is very much, you feel like you're on the canoe with them. So he'll say we're going to this river and then he'll give you history about the river, stories, folklore about that river, about the town around it, different stories, and then you'll get how he feels on the river and the flow of the canoe and going back to nature. It's very much one of those books of men going back to primal nature and feeling connected to it. I really enjoyed it. I felt like I was on the boat with him. There are a lot of literary references which I personally appreciate a lot. I love it when someone's like, and this author wrote this here, and this author lived nearby. I love those little nerdy, geeky literary references. I really liked it. I liked also just the talk about nature and how beautiful nature is and how we should appreciate it. Also, they camp a lot, so when they get into the river and canoe along a little bit, they then stop and camp in woods, and I liked all the things about camping, so I like reading about camping. Hate going camping, went last year, never again, but I like reading about camping. I read about it, I'm like, oh, it seems so quaint and lovely. I went last year, oh, never again, sweetheart. But I like reading about a bit of camping. I really enjoyed this. I would actually highly recommend this. Really was lovely, and it was really nice escapism throughout your day to read this. Not all of it's nice because they get into rocky parts, so there's peril in it. Really great book. Did really enjoy that. If you're looking for some non-fiction about nature, or if you live in the UK and you want to know more about rivers and the history of that, that is the book for you. I've been reading this book for so long. This is Carrie Fisher's Shockaholic. I started it probably about a year ago, and it's about Carrie Fisher, famously played Princess Leia, very famous actress. She went through shock therapy, and that's when they put shocks electric through your brain. I don't really know how it works, but they used to do that to jolt you. So she's an addict, and the idea behind it is they said, you've tried all these different treatments, they haven't worked, you have addiction tendencies, you take drugs, you have a drink, why don't you go through shock therapy? And it was very much the last ditch attempt for her, and they said this will jolt your mind and change your pattern of behaviour. So that's why she did it. At the point when she had shock therapy, her daughter was living with her daughter's dad, so she didn't have custody of her child anymore, so you can get that desperation. The beginning of the book is really talking about shock therapy. That's fascinating. That's really interesting because you're learning about it. What it does is it gets rid of your short-term memory, so you can remember things from the past, but you can't remember things in the present because it's really bad for your brain, this shock therapy. So she's talking about that, how she just completely loses days and she doesn't really know what's happened. That's all really interesting. The whole things about her addiction are very interesting. I also got told in my comments section in another video when I was talking about this that she had bipolar disorder. So that's really interesting. She doesn't mention any disorders. She's very much I don't know why I'm an addict. I don't know why I am some days really happy, some days really sad, even when I'm not on drugs. but someone said in my comments, which I don't know whether it's true, that she had bipolar disorder, and it sounds like someone who has bipolar disorder. So the beginning bit, really interesting, and then the rest of it was her going on about her life. She talks about Michael Jackson, she talks about Elizabeth Taylor, because Elizabeth Taylor married her dad. She talks about her parents a lot, and it very much turns into kind of a memoir, but it's so sporadic, it just irritated me. The stories, when I was reading them, I was enjoying the stories, but it was like she didn't finish a sentence. So she'd be talking about one person, then she'd be like, oh, that reminds me of this person, and it was just so all over the place and completely jumbled that I just couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't trust her narrative. I think that's what the real problem was, because it was just everywhere. It was kind of, you know, when you read a book and you're almost getting a headache because it's too all over the place and nothing's really connecting together properly. That's what this felt like, because she was just going off on like tangents continually, and I was like, no, go back and talk about Michael Jackson, what you were talking about him, or Elizabeth Taylor. It was just weird. I just don't get her writing. I know people love her, but I just don't get it. It's just that weirdness. But the beginning bit, all about shock therapy, thought was absolutely fabulous, but this has taken me years to finish because I just didn't want to pick it up. It just didn't do anything for me, so I didn't really like that one. Next up, I have a book that I was sent from the publishers ages ago. Gorgeous cover. This is Trying by Emily Phillips. Now, Emily Phillips, the author of this, her and her partner tried for a baby and they couldn't have a baby. So then this is a fiction book she wrote about a couple trying for a baby and they can't fall pregnant, but it's taken from her actual life. She was kind of inspired by her actual life. So oh, I wanted to love it because it's like based on Emily's life. I wanted to really love it, but I thought everything in this book was so surface level. Nothing went deeper, and I'm sure if you're trying for a baby and you can't fall pregnant, it must be a terrible depression that you fall into, but it was all just very kind of like, oh well, laughed off. It felt a bit like Bridget Jones's Diary, but for people trying for a baby. So they're obviously in the book having a lot of sex, and it's talking about that, but then she's also talking about all her friends are becoming pregnant and all her friends are on their second children by now, and she's in her 30s, so you know those eggs are going down. Us women have a clock inside us, it's ticking down, and she's talking about all that, but in such a funny, light-hearted way. It was a very light-hearted read. I didn't think it was very true to someone who was trying for a baby, who was desperate to have a child. It goes into her relationship with her husband and everything to do with that. I really liked the main character. That's one thing I would say. I loved the woman because she was so realistic, she was so funny. I'm guessing she's very much based on Emily's life. But the whole premise of it, like trying for a baby, I didn't know where it was really going. It was going into this woman's life and stuff about her job, and I found all that interesting, but another thing that I absolutely hated about it as well is that she had interviews with her friends in it. So for her job, she had to interview her friends. And it was interviews just pasted in. So her dialogue, dialogue. And it was like reading a film script. It was that kind of dialogue. And I thought it was so lazily done. I felt like she could have sat down, the main character, and had a conversation with her friend, because one of them had postnatal depression, another one was adopting. So she wanted to get these different opinions on how to start a family, but because it was done in this really lazy, like, it felt like, you know, you do your GCSE English and you might have to like write a story or do something creative with it, and you've just heard about like mixed media things, and you can put, oh, I can put a picture in there and I can put an interview in there. It felt very like underdeveloped, the whole book, that she would do that and keep that in there. And it also felt like serious topics like postnatal depression and people adopting, which I personally think adoption is one of the greatest things you can do with your life. I think it's such a beautiful thing. Just to kind of shoehorn it in such a lazy way just didn't feel right. I felt like the character should have gone to a coffee shop and spoke to her friend about adoption instead of just copying and pasting an interview copying and pasting an interview she was doing with her friend. It was just so lazy and unsincere. That's what I felt, because the adoption bit was nice, like I was enjoying everything about that, but then I wasn't connected to it and it felt very unsincere. Felt like the author wanted to, like halfway through was like, oh god, like it's just this woman kind of living her life, she's not that fussed, oh let's get her friends involved. Another thing is that at the end it just went mad Like, it turned into some kind of Lifetime, Danielle Steele drama of romance and passion. It just went a bit mad at the end. And I don't know whether she thought nothing's happened, and nothing was happening, but at the end kind of ruined it for me because it kind of just spiraled out of control. I didn't enjoy this, but actually that's a lie. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. Whilst I was reading it until the end bit, whilst I was reading it, I really enjoyed the main character. I enjoyed that woman. I thought she was great. I was finding out about her life. She was funny, she was witty, I enjoyed it. But then after I put it down, I was like, I've learned literally nothing from this. It just felt very lazy. It's quite like a long book, and yeah, it just wasn't for me personally. I then read A Box of Matches by Nicholson Baker. This is about a man gets up at like 4 AM every morning. He's decided, I'm just going to wake up early, and he's in his 40s. So he sneaks downstairs, his wife's asleep upstairs, his children are asleep upstairs, and the whole book is every day he wakes up, goes, good morning, it's 4 da da da, and he sits and he lights a fire, and then he remembers things about his life. They're not massive events, and there's even a bit in it where he says, like, my life has been very normal. I had a normal childhood, then got married, had children, got a great job, normal middle class pattern of life is what he went through. So he's just reflecting upon that. Nothing happens in this book, but it's really nicely written, and it's very confidently written. Like, you feel like the author's kind of holding your hand and taking you through it, and it just feels nice. It's just a nice book. Nothing's happened, it's just little reflections of his life, nothing major, but it's interesting. I also love the cover because at the beginning of the book he finds a box of matches and is lighting the fire, and then at the end of the book he says, I've only got one match left. So however many matches are in a box of matches, that's how many mornings you spend with him. And yeah, it was just nice. It was a bit eccentric. It reminded me of The Diary of a Nobody, which I'm sure came out in like Victorian times. The Diary of a Nobody. It was serialised in a newspaper, and then it was turned into a book. And the book is just this man moaning about his life, and his wife is called Carrie. And he's saying, Carrie and I did this today, it's all very middle class and nothing really happens, but it's funny. This is what this is. And the main man, his wife is called Claire. So I kept thinking of Diary of a Nobody. It wasn't as funny as Diary of a Nobody, but it still had wit within it. Very dry humour, I would say, about this book. I enjoyed it whilst I was reading it. I don't feel like I've really taken anything from the book afterwards, but it was enjoyable whilst I was reading. I then have two of the Worst Witch books, which, let me just say, I have a Worst Witch book announcement. The Worst Witch book series by Jill Murphy. I have an announcement. There is a Worst Witch book coming out later this year, a new one. A new one! I think like October time it might be coming out. Very excited for the new one. So I wanted to read the Worst Witch series. Because as a child I used to watch the TV series, but I never read the books that it was based on. So I finished off the series. I've read The Worst Witch to the Rescue and The Worst Witch and the Wishing Star. These are children books. They're gorgeous, lovely. It's about this witch who's completely hopeless called Mildred, and this horrible girl called Ethel, and Mildred has a lovely friend called Maud. It's about all the witches, and it's just fabulous. If you like Harry Potter, this was before Harry Potter, and it's just so lovely. It's about girl power. I really enjoyed it. I'm just gonna like brief synopsis of them. So Worst Witch and the Wishing Star, she gets a dog, but she wishes on a star for a dog, and then a dog appears, and it's about her relationship with this dog that she smuggled into her room. Really love it. And the school have to compete in a competition to win a swimming pool. It's just lovely. And then Worst Witch to the Rescue is about, she has a summer project, and her summer project gets stolen by Ethel, and it's about her trying to get that back. Lovely books, absolutely adore. Also, Jill Murphy wrote and illustrated the Worst Witch books, and if you like Chris Riddell, like Jill Murphy, she's the original. If you like Chris Riddell in like Coraline or Goth Girl, Jill Murphy is that kind of style of illustration. Gorgeous. I then read If Cats Disappeared from the World, and this was originally published in Japanese. And this is about a man who the devil comes to him and says, you're gonna die. He knows he's gonna die, he's got a brain tumour, you're gonna die soon. But what you can do is you can get rid of one thing on earth every day. And every time you get rid of something, you get an extra day to live. So the devil is really telling him what to get rid of. He doesn't have a choice in it. So the devil says stuff like, get rid of the telephone. So no one has telephones anymore. Okay, so we'll get rid of the telephone. Done. You've got an extra day on life. And then the man reflects upon how the telephone, what memories he has with it, how he's connected with it. We go into, throughout the book, we hear that his mum has died, and he has this lovely little cat they had a cat called Cabbage who died, and so they got another cat called Lettuce, and he lives with Lettuce and he loves Lettuce, and there's so many things in his life that he thinks I haven't done, I'm still young and I'm gonna die and I haven't done these things, and it's just reflections on life, and oh, it broke my little heart. It was lovely, I really liked it, and it's completely absurd. The moments when the devil appear are completely off the wall, absurd, but it feels realistic. It's so beautifully written, it's lovely, and each chapter is a different day, so it takes you from, like, let's say Monday to when he was gonna die. It takes you right up, and it's just got such a charm. It's just really lovely and warm, but it's so weird because you think, like, the devil's seeing him and the devil's really mad and eccentric, and it all just feels like it wouldn't work, but it's so beautifully written that it really works, and it's about reflections of a life and what he looks back and what he regrets upon his life and what he wishes he would have said to people and done, and it's just lovely. I loved all the bits with his cat as well, and how he's thinking of, like, all these great plans, all these great things I should have done, and then he sits and, like, strokes Lettuce, and he's like, this is really in life what makes me happy, being with my cat. These are the moments that really I should treasure, not that I wish I would have climbed up Kilimanjaro or whatever. Like, no, that I'm stroking a cat and getting the enjoyment out of little things in life, the everyday things. I really liked this. There's a load more in it, but I'm not going to say, but, like, I really did enjoy that a hell of a lot. Gorgeous book. Oh god, next up, don't. This is Nick Hornby. I love, let me just say, Nick Hornby wrote a book called About a Boy, and About a Boy is one of my favourite films of all time. Adore it. This is Nick Hornby, Juliet Naked, and it's about a woman who, her boyfriend is really obsessed with this rock star. And then her and her boyfriend break up, and she leaves a bad review of this rock star's album. Before they break up, she leaves this bad review and says, like, she doesn't like the rock star's album because her boyfriend's so obsessed and it's all really weird. And then the rock star starts talking to her and saying, okay, let's email. So then they're emailing each other, and it's really about her relationship with the rock star. I don't really want to say much else. This was absolutely dreadful. It felt like a movie film script, and I am aware that this has been turned into a film. This didn't feel like a book. This felt like a film. This felt like this was a pitch idea for a film. Here's a bit of a script for a film. Here's some pitch ideas. There you go. And how we learn out about the rock star's life and anything to do with him is a Wikipedia page just been published into this book. That's it. So that's why it felt like a researcher had been told, right, we're going to make this film, clip up some bits of the script, put in some Wikipedia page stuff, clip it up, and we'll give it to the casting director to find someone to be in this film. It didn't feel like a full book. It was just so, oh, it makes me so angry that way. It took me quite a bit of time to read, and it really was so bad. I was just waiting for it to get good. Also, the main character, the woman, is just annoying. She is very directionless, but with, like, everything. She's a bit of a pushover, but it's not done in a good way. All the female characters in it were hateful and awful, to the point where the characters were actually saying how bad the females were within it. I said, I did a reading vlog, and I said, I don't know if Nick Hornby hates women or hates the female characters that he's written. It was that bad. It just, as a film, I can 100% see how this would work. But I thought I was reading a novel, and as a novel, it's got no enjoyability factor. It felt like this has been turned into a massive film, and then they decided to make the film into a book, but a book for fans. So we put in a Wikipedia page, and the emails were just pasted, like, from to, like, pages and pages. It was like a book within it. Oh, don't, I'm ranting. But it was like a book within a book, which is my pet hate. I hated this. I really thought it was done lazily, and I thought it was like a book. You know, when an author becomes very successful and then they just write trash. It felt like that. It felt like this will sell and this will be turned into a massive movie, and the book doesn't really matter. That's what it personally felt like to me. Let's move on, because I can literally rant all day. Poem for the day 1. So I'm still like, after this book. So this is with Foreword by Wendy Cope, and this is supposed to, you'll read a poem every day. So it's set out like that. So it'll be like March 12th, and then it will have a poem to do with that season, whatever season we're in, March in the UK. And then at the bottom it will have facts about the author of the poem, and at the top it will just have literary facts of stuff that happened on that day. I have tabbed a lot of bits within it that I really liked. I found some new authors that I hadn't, like, heard of before, that are poets that I was excited to read. One thing I would say as well, someone's written in the front of mine, For Dear Mummy with Much Love Sally, and Mummy's just put it in the charity shop 2009. But I also made a note of, there is a lot of Shakespeare, there's a lot of Browning, Wordsworth and Keats, and they are just repeated throughout the book. So I stupidly thought we'd have 365 poems from 365 different authors, but it's not that. A lot of the poems are very well known ones, and there's a lot of Shakespeare just repeated throughout the book, and I wasn't really expecting that. I tabbed the ones of the people that I hadn't heard of before. So Wendy Cope, I absolutely loved her poems. She's really like funny, and at the bottom of each poem it had the poem and then a little bit about the author, and some of it was like, this author was writing this when he was contemplating life itself. It was all a bit pretentious. And then Wendy Cope's one would be like a funny poem, and it'd be like she was gonna go to Sainsbury's but she wrote this poem instead. It was just like funny little anecdotes with Wendy. I did enjoy this. I didn't read one a day because some of them I didn't like. I wanted to like get to ones that I liked so I could read a poem I liked a day. Bitchy, but it's true. But I would definitely recommend this because there are some great like new poets that I hadn't heard of before, but just knows a lot of repetition of Shakespeare and Wordsworth throughout it. I then read a Tracy Chevalier. She is the queen of my heart. This is The Lady and the Unicorn by Tracy Chevalier, and this is historical fiction. So the historical element is that these tapestries do exist in France. These are real tapestries, but no one really knows the people who made the tapestries. It's not really known. So what happens in this book is an artist has to make tapestries for this man, and he starts seducing this man's daughter. It's told from loads of different people throughout the book, but putting it like simply, this artist is a pig. He's a womanizer. He's just trying to like sleep with all the women he can. At the beginning there's someone who's going to lose their job because he slept with them, and then this man who's making the tapestries for, he starts seducing that girl, and then he has to visit where the tapestries are being made, and a family are making the tapestries, and I loved everything to do with that. There was one called, I think her name was Eleanor, it's spelled A-I-L-E-N-O-R, and I loved her story. I loved everything to do with her, but he tries to like seduce all the women and the girls there, and I just really hated him, and he was in it quite a lot, like telling the story. It's set in the 15th century, and yeah, I've put about a man who sleeps with everyone. He has to design the tapestries, and the tapestries stand for the senses, so like smell, hear, see, and the women he meets throughout the story become the women in the tapestries. So that's the historical element within it. I really loved this. Even though I hated the man, I hated him, I loved all the different women. So you have him seducing them and really ruining people's lives and not caring, getting women pregnant, and obviously if they're unwed mothers, they don't have money to do anything, so they have to give the baby up and they lose their jobs, and then another one gets sent to a convent, and he's just messing with everyone's life continually, and there's no kind of like justice for him. It's just he thinks it's okay because women are second-class citizens. And I loved them when you heard the women and their side and what they thought about the situation. I thought this was fantastic. I love Tracy Chevalier. Girl with a Pearl Earring, love. Virgin Blue, love. Falling Angels, love. And now The Lady and the Unicorn, love. I just love the way she writes. It's just so beautiful. And I have never read a book with a male character telling you the narrative in the story. It's always been told by women, and so that was interesting to have her writing a man but at that historical time. But I loved it. I loved hearing the women's story. Elena's story, just stunning. Claude, oh, I just adored it. I just loved it. I can't recommend it enough. It was just gorgeous. It was lovely. If you like historical fiction and you like it told from a historical woman's point of view, Tracy Chevalier is just the place to go. There's so much like tenderness, and also the thing with Tracy Chevalier is after you finish the book you're still thinking about the female characters, and you're still thinking, oh my god, I hope she's okay, oh my god, I wonder what happened, and oh, I really loved it. I really did. I feel like emotional. It was that good. Loved. That was great. I then read another poetry collection. This is classic readings and poems for weddings, christenings, funerals, and all occasions. This is by BATSFORD Publishing, and it's a really beautiful book. So you have different poems and readings if you were going to a wedding, gorgeous pieces of art within it as well. And I think if you're getting married or you're going to a funeral and you need something that you want to read, this is a great book to have, like just to buy and have, so that when you're going to those kind of occasions you have something. I just enjoyed reading it. There are a lot of them are really long, so like long speeches within it about like birth and love and sorrow, and I just really enjoyed it. It was the kind of book that I definitely like, and I definitely think you should have like books like this if you are getting married or something and you want something to read out. I really enjoyed it. A lot of it is very famous stuff, so you probably have already heard of the stories before you read them and that, but I really liked it. I loved the presentation. Oh, it was very nice. Be a good gift for someone if they're like getting married, to give it to them as a gift before the wedding. I then, oh god, not going to talk about it. This is SCUM Manifesto by Valerie Solanas. I'm not really going to talk about this because Valerie Solanas famously shot Andy Warhol, and then she got arrested. She was put in a mental institute, she came out, she was in and out of prison and all this. Before that, as a child, she was abused by her dad. She then went to go and live with her grandparents and her granddad beat her up. She then became pregnant at something like 15 and was homeless. She had a really awful life. She became a prostitute, and then she was very creative in many different ways, and she met Andy Warhol, the famous artist. True life story. She met Andy Warhol and she thought that he was conning her out of money, and that's why she shot him. You can see it from her point of view. If you do a bit of research into it, you can kind of see, oh, I can see how she thought he was conning her. And then after that she had to go back into prostitution. She had a terrible life. But this is her manifesto of how to get rid of men. So SCUM stands for Society Cutting Up Men. And the year before she shot Andy Warhol, she bought this book out, and then a year later she shot Andy Warhol, and the press said, why did you shoot him? And she said, you'll have to read my book to find out. And this is all about why men are poisonous and men should be killed and taken away and we don't need them and everything. I made so many notes. I found this book really interesting. I thought it was Society Cutting Up Men, sorry. I thought it was parody, but I thought it was political fiction. So political fiction is when you take an idea like feminism and you make it fictional, but you might also do it with other theories of thought. I also thought that sociologist Jeanette Castro said, parody of Freudian theory of femininity. I saw that a lot throughout this book, so that's personally, I don't think she was being serious and she wanted to kill men, because she says throughout the book, men want to be women, men want to continue to take women's places. Well, where have you heard that argument? It's when women want to be like CEOs of companies, and then people say, oh, these women coming in, taking our jobs, these women just want to be men. And they don't want to be men, they just want to be CEO of a company, you know. Oh no, they're just these female football players, they just want to be men. Well, no, they don't, they just like playing football. So I felt like she was really playing with the idea, and there were so many different things. I filmed a review on this and I was going to put it up, but you just get so much hate for even reading this book, and people who don't watch your channel just kind of flock over to be like, oh, you hate men, and just be hateful about it. So yeah, I'm not going to do a video on this. I might put something on my Patreon, like if I edit the review of it, it might go on my Patreon, but I think YouTube is not really the forum for this. Just people really do despise this book, and I can see if you were a man reading it, you would despise it and hate it, but I don't think she's talking literally. That's all I'm going to say on that. I don't want a big debate. And then last but not least is my Hannah Tay book. So I picked this book so we could all read it together and give our thoughts. This is set in British Raj. British Raj is when the English basically went over to India and stole some of India. And we're like, we're all going to live here now. All the Indian people can go away, we're going to live here. So it's set in British Raj. And we have a doctor called Aziz, who he is Indian, and he befriends the English. And it goes into how that friendship kind of starts. And he says, I'm going to show you around some caves. So he takes them to the caves, and then a woman thinks she's been assaulted in a cave and that Dr. Aziz has done it, but we know that he hasn't done that. And then it goes on from that and what happens to him. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was really, I loved it. I'll just say it now, but that is because I love Ian Forster. I love his writing so much, adore it. But I thought it was really interesting how there was a lot of racism within the book. People, all the English people were very racist towards Indian people. And so this woman's kind of had this, she's passed out and she, in the cave, became very disorientated, and then she ran into a cactus cactus and that her glasses were like snapped off her neck. So she's been through all this. She doesn't really know what's happened, and it's about people kind of manipulating a situation for their own gains. So the men are all saying he did it, but Ian Forster deliberately makes sure that we don't hear from Adele, the woman who thinks she's been assaulted. We don't hear from her till much later on. So all we're hearing are these men who we know already have racist views of Indian people. All of them are saying he assaulted her, he is evil, da 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 da, and we don't hear it from Adele for a really long time. And how someone, you know, if you did become lightheaded or whatever in a cave or something, how people can manipulate you in such a way, because throughout the book as well there's a lot of sexism. So when the women talk, the men are like, oh darling, stop. It's very, they're silenced, they're hushed. And so then to already be kind of like submissive, they're all very submissive, the women, to be in a submissive position and then to have something happen to you, you're very easy, someone can manipulate what's happened to you for their own gain. And I found that very interesting, because I don't feel Adele was evil at all. I feel like there was a lot of manipulation put on her, and she was already in like a bad position before that. I loved Aziz. I absolutely adored him so much, the Doctor. And then you find out about his life, and I just loved him. I loved this book so much. There's a lot of racism, there's a lot of sexism, but it's in it to say like the time and the time in which they were living. I loved that. So this is it. This is the end of the video. We have finally made it to the end. This was such a long video. I have like such a mixed bag of reviews. Some of these books I despised, like Hornby, but some of them I absolutely love. So I think overall I had a great reading month. Tell me what your favourite book was for February that you read. Put it down below if you've made it this far in the video. I mean, it's probably been a long one by now. And I will see you again very soon for another video. My next video will be my review of A Passage to India, and then I'll be revealing March's book, which I've chosen a fantastic book for us to read for my book club in March. So I will see you again soon for another video.